Considering home security? Consider this. For 140 years, ADT has helped stop more crime than any other home security company. The yard sign isn't just a sign, it's a line in the sand. It's no wonder 5 times more people choose ADT to protect their homes. Visit ADT.com to learn more. For license information and terms and conditions, visit ADT.com.
There we are, and congratulations again to the Houston Astros. They lost 111 games. Feels like yesterday. And when it was actually yesterday, they won the World Series in Game 7. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guest, like Buster Olney on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, he'll join us bleary-eyed but excited from Los Angeles in just a couple of minutes. And Booger McFarland is in here this morning. And I'm looking at a bunch of this Twitter here, and some of this is just insane to me. Like now all of a sudden everyone is on this Kershaw bandwagon. Ricardo tweets at me, Greeny, Dave Roberts will have nightmares for the rest of his life. Darvish's stats don't matter. Kershaw is an all-time great. Kershaw had a 4-run lead 2 days ago with a chance to put his team in a critical 3-2 lead in the World Series and couldn't even consider holding it. He got obliterated the other day. He was just as bad in Game 5, maybe not quite as bad, but he struggled about as much in Game 5 with a 4-run lead and then a 3-run lead as Darvish did in Game 3. So it's very easy for us to sit here and say, oh, yeah, Kershaw is ready to go. And is he historically a greater pitcher than Darvish? Of course he is. But I don't have any problem with him giving the ball to Yu Darvish to start that game last night.
You know, Green, I can agree with you. Even though I would have started Clayton Kershaw, I can agree with you that I'm okay to start Yu Darvish. I just would have brought Kershaw in at the end of the first inning, because when you saw that Yu Darvish didn't have his stuff, now you bring your ace in. Now you bring Kershaw in. And so I can understand, you know, everybody's got hindsight and they're looking backwards and saying what you should have done. I just thought the biggest mistake that Roberts is going to probably not be able to sleep about is the fact that he waited so long to get Darvish out of the game. That
I probably agree with you with. We will talk to Buster about all those in just a moment. And then we also have changed a long-standing, or we've added a corollary, a codicil, if you will, to a long-standing Mike and Mike rule. We stand firmly against in-stadium proposals. I don't like the Jumbotron proposal for 2 reasons. One, it's played. I mean, it's been done 1 trillion times. Maybe the first 2 or 3 times it was done, it was phenomenal. Now, it feels like it's practically a weekly occurrence. And the second is the extraordinary position that it puts the proposee in. Right? If I'm proposing to you and you don't really want to marry me, but it's on like, you know, the Jumbotron and everyone's cheering all around you,
right.
You know, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
Do you have to say yes?
You have to say yes. And so, again, I go back to your proposal, my proposal. When you proposed to your wife, what would you do, would you say was the degree of certainty that she was going to say yes?
99.9%.
I'm with you. And so I would say I was in that same ballpark when I proposed to Stace, now 21 years ago. But there's always that 0.1%.
Right.
And on that chance, you know, you're Carlos Correa. Now, I don't know anything about him or his girlfriend and their relationship. They look like they're a delightful couple. And Eduardo Perez, who knows him well, was telling us that she traveled with the team a lot all throughout the year, that Carlos Beltran told the much younger Correa, if she makes you happy, then you should have her around, whatever it is. Maybe they had already predetermined that they were going to get engaged at some point.
Right.
And so he really did know with certainty she's going to say yes. But now you're on Fox. Ken Rosenthal is standing there with the microphone.
Queuing you
the
up.
Celebration is all around you, and you're like, give me just a second here. You know, it's really the ultimate in we just won the World Series. Hold my beer. And then you turn around and you're like, here we go. And now you're on a knee and you're proposing. This to me is a monumental moment that we see in sports history.
By the way, our producer, Brooksy, said he was 100% when he proposed, by the way. Now, I'm not sure if we believe that, but he said he was 100% because, and I'm assuming he believed in himself that much.
Yeah.
Not really sure.
Yeah. I don't know either, but I mean, having worked with him for all these years, I don't say that he's 100% certain of absolutely anything. Meanwhile, let us go live to Los Angeles, where once again our buddy Buster Olney has staked out a spot in the hotel lobby at 5 o'clock in the morning to schlep himself out of bed early after covering these World Series games.
I wondered if Buster sleep.
Let's start with that. He's on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Buster, have you been to sleep at all?
Yes, I slept for 2 hours. It took me a long time to get to sleep, but I had so much adrenaline from that game and seeing all that stuff post-game. It was really, really cool. And one thing to keep in mind about Carlos Correa with that engagement, guys, he's always been a planner his whole life. This is someone who went to his parents when he was 8, 9 years old and asked them to send him to a school. He grew up in Puerto Rico. He asked them to send him to a school where he could take English lessons because, as he told his parents then, when he became a Major League Baseball player, he would have to do interviews in English. That's Carlos Correa, pretty certain.
That's phenomenal. And how you interviewed him right after the proposal. Can you give us just a little taste of what that moment was like?
Yeah, he was so excited. He had the biggest grin on his face. And, of course, one of the questions I had, being a nerd that I am, is like, how did you pull this off? Because he's got this ring, which is the size of the state of Texas. And I'm thinking, how in the heck did he get it into that spot? And he talked about going to one of the clubhouse guys and saying, look, I don't mean to jinx this. This is in the 9th inning. But if we win the World Series, bring me this ring after the game.
Oh, no. Violation. That's a violation. I'm telling you right now, you want to talk about spitting in the face of the gods. If he actually asked that someone to bring him the ring before the game was over in the event, in that moment, then if the Dodgers come all the way back and win, he has to do the proposal anyway. In my opinion, you have to, even in the losing moment, like Kershaw's being interviewed, and I think at that moment Correa has to walk over to Ken Rosenthal and say, listen, I need a minute here. Because if you've asked for that ring in the 9th inning, but the game is not yet over, in my opinion, if they don't wind up holding on to that lead and losing, it's your fault. Agree or disagree, Buster Olney?
No, I totally disagree. This is someone who probably 10 years before Sports Illustrated anointed the Astros as World Series champions. He figured that the Astros were going to be 2017 champions. He probably was picking out the ring when he was 12. That's Carlos Correa.
All right, so let's get down to some of the serious, but obviously it's a great moment for him, and it was a very sweet moment. It actually made Eduardo Perez tear up on our set earlier this morning. Let's go to George Springer. I know you had a conversation with him before last night's game. He hit his obligatory home run in the game on his way to being named the World Series MVP.
Yeah, and I've never had a conversation like this with an athlete until like years after a competition. So I go into the Astros clubhouse, and they have an 80s mixtape, which was George Springer's choice, and he's bobbing his head, sitting at his locker, and he had the biggest smile on his face. And he just looked at me and said, look, you know what? I want to win tonight. He said, but no matter what happens, he said, I've had so much fun. This is such a great experience. And he talked about the chance to be in a competition like this against a team like the Dodgers. I couldn't believe it. Like, he already had the thing all sort of worked out his mind. No matter what happened, this was a good thing in his life. And, of course, he went on in the field. And it obviously, before the game, with that perspective, it seemed like he had no pressure on him, despite all the focus on the Astros, all the focus on Game 7, all the focus on what was going on the field. It was remarkable, and maybe the least surprising thing that he played so well in the spotlight.
Buster, Greeny and I have been kind of going back and forth all morning about the pitcher that threw George Springer one of those home runs, Darvish.
Yeah.
There was a decision by Dave Roberts to leave him in the second inning after the first inning where he didn't look so good, missing his spots. What do you make of that decision by Roberts to leave Darvish in the game at that moment?
Well, he had him, lined up before the World Series to pitch Game 7. Dave Roberts has done a phenomenal job. I think he's a great manager, but there are a couple things about that. First off, to your point, Booger, I think that early in the game, I was surprised that he stayed in as long as he did. When he was warming up before the first inning, he bounced the ball to the backstop, and Aaron Boone and I looked at each other because we knew how much pressure that Darvish puts on himself before these games, and it's part of the reason why he melted down. He just did not have the electric stuff that separates him. 47 pitches last night, only 2 missed swings, and one of those was his next to last pitch when George Springer took a swing like you would take in a wiffle ball game. He was all over what Darvish was throwing to the point that Aaron Boone wondered if he was tipping his pitches. But I'll go one step further than that, and I wrote and talked about this earlier in the postseason. When teams get into this situation where they have their ace available, the Nationals had this with Max Scherzer, other teams have had this case, and you know that you're going to be able to pitch him in an elimination game, why not start that pitcher? I don't understand. If you knew you had 3 or 4 innings of Clayton Kershaw, why not put him out there first as opposed to somebody who's not as good as Clayton Kershaw. And Kershaw went out there following Darvish, and he was tremendous. 31 pitches in his first 3 innings, 4 scoreless innings. I do wonder if this is something that teams should think about now going into the postseason. Well, if you have your ace available, pitch him.
We're getting a ton of reaction suggesting exactly that. The only thing I'll say, Buster, is, and I know that you said it before the game. We played sound bites of you saying it before the game. But what I'm saying is, Yu Darvish in his previous 5 starts before Game 3 was untouchable. He gave up 3 earned runs. He had 35 strikeouts and 2 walks. His ERA was .88. So, and Clayton Kershaw in Game 5 had the World Series in his hands with a 4-run lead and couldn't hold on to it. So I understand Kershaw is historically great, but maybe he felt, given the ball to Darvish last night, that Darvish was going to get him 5 or 6 spectacular innings, and then he could make decisions from there, and was less confident that Kershaw would, especially considering he just pitched 2 days ago. Does that make no sense?
No, that does make sense, but I will tell you, after watching Darvish in Game 3, and there's a terrific story done by Dylan Hernandez going into yesterday's start about Darvish and how he seemed so tense before Game 3 and how teammates were sort of propping him up. And Darvish talked about that whole, the slick ball theory, which apparently only really applied to the pitchers who struggled in this series. And Darvish talking about how he was glad that he had the answer for why he struggled. That would have concerned me. And it really comes down to this. Going into a Game 7, an elimination game, a game to win the World Series, if you're Dave Roberts, if you're the Dodgers, who do you have most confidence in your heart? Clayton Kershaw, arguably the greatest pitcher of all time, or Yu Darvish? And to me, if Kershaw is available, go with him.
All right, that's fair enough. And look, you're certainly not the only person saying that. I'm getting a ton of Twitter reaction saying that as well. Something else, and I'm sure you were getting the 2 hours of sleep that you managed last night while this happened, but we opened our show this morning. Eduardo Perez was on our set, and it was magnificent insight. And he said that during the game last night, he picked up on a way that Darvish was tipping his pitches. And just give it to you very briefly. He said that when Darvish was throwing his fastball, the hand was totally still in the glove before he went into his motion. And then when he was throwing the slider, the hand was just fidgeting a little bit, obviously getting his fingers in the appropriate position. That he picked up on that during the game last night, and he did a tape on it on SportsCenter last night, which Booger and I didn't get a chance to see. But that he believes firmly that was a significant factor last night, that the Astros were on those pitches and they knew what was coming. Did you get any indication of that? Did anyone say anything about that after the game?
I was asking more bigger picture questions of the Astros players after the game, but I will tell you, as I mentioned, during the broadcast, Aaron Boone suggested as much because he thought that the swings of the Astros were so aggressive, and it was as if they knew exactly what was coming.
So, that really does lend a lot of credence to that, and it's a fascinating thing to think about because, Buster, maybe you would know the answer to this because, Booger and I were just trying to think about it. How much self-scouting goes on with stuff like that in the major leagues? It's easy for us to sit here. If Eduardo could pick it up watching the game on television, then the Astros could pick it up watching all of their videotape, but couldn't the Dodger pitching coach and or Darvish himself or someone in the Dodgers team also pick up on stuff like that? How much self-scouting of that sort, to your knowledge, goes on?
A lot. And in fact, the story came out after Darvish's last start for the Texas Rangers. He made it against the Marlins. A piece came out and said that the Rangers thought that in his last start, when he got hammered like 10 runs in an inning and a third, they thought he was tipping his pitches. And the pitching coach will talk about it with him after a start like that. Pitchers, they'll talk about it during the course of the game, but it has to be self-corrected. And I'm sure that probably Eduardo mentioned this to you as well. One of the guys known for that skill, and Eduardo was one of those guys known for that skill, is Alex Cora, who last night served his last night as the bench coach of the Houston Astros, our former colleague, who's now going to become the manager of the Boston Red Sox. He is known as absolutely one of the primo guys to read stuff like that on a pitcher, and I'm sure he probably made the hitters aware of it.
It's fascinating. Buster, where do the Dodgers go from here? Obviously, Westgate has come out and made them the favorite next year. They failed this year. Do we give them any credit for just getting there? How do they change this team up where they can get back here again and then get over the hump?
Yeah, they should be back in position to take another run. I mean, they had the deepest roster of any team during the course of the regular season. They had by far the highest payroll. They are expected to draw their payroll back because they have expiring contracts for guys like Carl Crawford, like Andre Ethier. They're probably not going to make big expenditures, but keep this in mind. If, in fact, this player known as the Babe Ruth of Japan, Shohei Ohtani, winds up playing in the United States, the full expectation of a lot of people in the industry is going to wind up with one of the usual suspects, either the Yankees or the Dodgers or probably some other big market team. He obviously would represent, a terrific addition. He's a great left-handed hitter that throws 101 miles an hour. He wants to both pitch and hit, and you know that the Dodgers are probably out there looking for bullpen options as well.
So who would you say, as we look forward to next year, which young team is the most set up? We were going over this earlier this morning, a chance to be a dynasty. Aaron Boone was talking about the Astros having a chance to be a dynasty. They have so much young talent. The Dodgers have a ton of young talent. The Cubs have a ton of young talent. They've been, at least as far as the LCS, 3 consecutive years. The Yankees are a team that has a ton of young talent, and people are excited about their future. If you had to make a bet on one of these teams to be I don't even know how we're going to quantify a dynasty over the next 5 or 6 years, but to be the one that repeats and is in there every single year, which young talent do you put your money on?
The Yankees. Look, I think the Astros certainly have a chance to come back next year. They've got Verlander back for a couple more years. They've got Dallas Keuchel. They've got pitching. The Cubs have all those great young position players, but they have some real pitching gaps to fill in going forward. But moving forward, the Yankees, incredible young core players. They have an ace who's 23 years old in Luis Severino. They have pitching coming behind it. They have tremendous financial flexibility. They're expected to be big players in that big free agent class in 2018, which is why whoever replaces Joe Girardi, man, is he going to inherit a great spot.
Outstanding. No question about it. Listen, Buster, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you getting up early every single morning here and coming on and helping us understand all the things that are going on and helping our audience understand it. So thank you. Travel home safe, and we will talk to you very soon.
Take it easy, Buster.
That sounds great, guys.
That's Robert Stanberry Olney III with us again. He wakes up in this hotel in L.A. First of all, he flies out there. They fly him through Detroit, which is hilarious to me. I don't know why I find that.
You couldn't get a direct flight?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, there's only like 30 nonstops a day from New York to Los Angeles. They fly him through Detroit. But the upside of that is they have excellent food options in the Detroit airport.
Yes.
I know I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. And then he gets up in his hotel, and he is such a good person that not only does he wake up for us, but he doesn't want to do the interview with us from his room for fear that it will disturb the people who are in the rooms next to him. It might wake them up. So he goes down to the lobby and stakes out a spot. Security was all over him the first day that he did it because, here's some guy standing there talking very loudly in the lobby of the hotel at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's the kind of man Buster Olney is.
He's better than me because I would have – probably the only thing I would have done is gone on the balcony. Like, I would have gone on the balcony, got some fresh air, because I would have still been asleep at 2 a.m. in the morning or 4, whatever time it is out there right now trying to do this interview.
Oh, absolutely. There's no conceivable chance I would have agreed to do it in the first place. So you're both better than I am. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Okay, while we have a minute here, and you're going to be with me again tomorrow, so we can spend a little more time on this. But I thought this was very interesting yesterday. We had Trevor Manich in here yesterday, and Golick and myself, and we were talking about the prospects in college this year for players going forward and the way that these quarterbacks have diminished to some degree. And most of the conversation stemmed from Sam Darnold. Now there's a story yesterday that says that Darnold might be considering staying in college just to avoid going to Cleveland, if that's the way that thing works out. It wouldn't be the first time it's happened.
Yeah.
We've seen it happen before. But then there are a lot of people who are saying with some of the fundamental mistakes that we're seeing him make this year, he may be better suited to go back to college and work on that anyway. Yep. What is your take on Darnold, who was considered to be an Elway-level prospect before the season began?
Darnold has all the physical attributes, Greeny. I mean, if you look at him, he's 6'4", 240 pounds. He's athletic, big arm, even though he's got a little bit of a not a hitch, but he drops his arm a little bit. He can do everything, all the trigger words. He can make all the throws. Here's the problem with Sam Darnold. It's decision-making. And to me, that's the number one prerequisite you need to be a starting quarterback of any high-level caliber in the National Football League. You have to have good decision-making. His decision-making has gotten worse. I want to say he only threw 8 or 9 interceptions last year. This year, he's in the double digits as throwing picks. And that's something you can't do. And even there have been so many times where he threw a ball that should have been picked because of bad decision-making. I like Sam Darnold, but if you tell me that this guy is going to look the part but not play the part from a decision-making standpoint, I wouldn't draft him. Now, some team is going to draft him just because of the physical attributes and the measurables. I think when it's all said and done, Greeny, he'll come out. I think he'll go in the first round. I think the best quarterback that will come out of this class will be Josh Rosen. Rosen has gotten an unfair rap going back to when he had the hot tub in his dorm room. I mean, I like the hot tub. Some people didn't. Okay. I was jealous. I didn't have one at LSU. Would have loved to have one of those. Baker Mayfield is a guy that's rising. A lot of people like his moxie. They like his ability. They like his, that it factor. So he's a guy that's rising.
Maddox loved him. Yeah, Trevor loves him.
Love him. I love Baker Mayfield. Then you got guys, the kid at Wyoming, Josh Allen. I don't know how we're going to scout him because he's playing with a terrible supporting cast. And also, he hasn't played very well this year. So I think Rosen, for me, will be number one. Darnold will get drafted. Baker Mayfield will be in there. Mason Rudolph, people are concerned about his throwing motion, that he puts the ball just a little bit. So we thought about this as a very deep quarterback class, and it is. I just think that the cream is eventually going to rise to the top in Rosen.
All right, we are Mike and Mike. We'll get Adam Schefter in here with some football conversation as we continue and more baseball, including coming up next. I've been asking the question, which team is best set up to have enormous success in the future? I can give you one good number that suggests we have an answer, and it's very good news for fans of one American League team.
Hey girl, have you done something new with your scales? Using new moisturizer? Nice. It really brings out the hazel in your eyes. Oh, hold on. Are you using whitening strips too? Your fangs look good, girl. Really good.
A really charming snake charmer? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
Wait, what? Have you been doing Pilates too?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
As I prepare to bring Schefter into the conversation, let me pay off my tease, because the question has been asked. There's all these teams with so much good young talent. The Dodgers have tons of it, and they are the Vegas favorite to win next year's World Series. The Red Sox have a ton of good young players. Right. The Yankees, the Cubs, the Astros, and others. So I had Hembo do a little work for me here, and here's the answer. The team that had the highest WAR, wins over against replacement, this past year of players 27 or younger, the New York Yankees. The Yankees by a little bit. The Yankees followed by the Cubs, followed by the Astros, followed by the Diamondbacks, followed by the Dodgers. Those are the teams, the 5 teams that had the most WAR, the highest WAR, of players 27 or younger. So is that the answer to the question, who's going to be the best team in baseball the next 5 years? No, but it's a pretty good way to try and make a guess. So it's the Yankees, whose WAR was 35.8 amongst players 27 or younger, led, of course, by Aaron Judge.
I like that, and that's kind of what Buster alluded to. But if you gave me an opportunity to choose between the young teams, I think I still may take the Cubs. Between the Astros, the Cubs, the Yankees, I think I still would probably choose the Cubs.
I probably would, too. You've seen them get there and do it, and this year was a disappointment because they lost in the LCS, which is remarkable. They've been in the National League Championship Series 3 straight years, and they've won 1 World Series along the way. I think they will win more. Much more on the Astros as we continue, but right now let's talk some football. Our NFL insider extraordinaire, Adam Schefter, is working overtime, and he's with us here. Good morning, Schefty.
Gentlemen, nice to be with you this morning.
Crazy week, right? I mean, just
insane.
Crazy deadline
Insane.
Stuff. Yeah.
Like, if you go back to last week, really, with the Bob McNair comments, kicking it all off, and then the Texans basically trying to walk out in mass on Friday, which we've never seen anything like that, to Sunday and the action there and Roger Goodell's contract and the uncertainty surrounding that, into Monday with the Zach Miller injury, the Jimmy Garoppolo trade, the Dwayne Brown trade, the Jay Ajayi trade, the Kelvin Benjamin trade, the A.J. McCarron near trade. The NFL doesn't have that happen around the trade deadline. And remember when we were on the show last week in this segment, you asked me if there would be a lot of activities, and I said that there were GMs, one specific GM who told me that the mix of teams that are converged together with a chance this year with all these young, aggressive general managers who love to make moves created what could be a volatile cocktail for the trade deadline. And that's exactly what happened. I tried to go trick-or-treating, 4 o'clock. I told my family.
Yeah.
I told my daughter. I said, Dylan, 4 o'clock trade deadline, 4:01. We're out the door. We're going to be ringing doorbells. We're going to get a lot of candy. And I'm about to leave, and all of a sudden I get a call that the A.J. McCarron Brown's trade was almost near, and I'm on the phone. I'm taking her trick-or-treating. This went on for about 2 hours. So the Cleveland Browns marred my Halloween trick-or-treat experience with my daughter. I'm still angry to this day.
Well, that's terrible, but also it should be pointed out, and most people have probably seen it. Your daughter is also, she's probably our second best NFL insider. I've seen the interviews.
She's the best.
I've seen her get the work done out there, so I'm assuming that in between doorbells, she was also on the phone working a couple of sources.
Well, actually, last night, she and I were sitting down having dinner, and she grabbed my iPhone. She said, Dad, Gronk tagged me on his Instagram account where he posted a video of her interviewing him. I had no idea he did this. I'm not up on the Instagram accounts like she is. She picked up on that, so she's on the ball for a 9-year-old.
All right, that's terrific. I want to ask you about two of the deals that happened and get a little bit of the insight into them. One of them is the thing with the Browns because, I mean, the stories were all over the place of how and why it happened. What can you clear up for me here? Because first there were these stories that the Browns were celebrating and they didn't get the paperwork in. Then there were the stories
think that's true.
that they got the paper. They thought the Bengals would submit it. They sent it to them and thought they would send it to the NFL. All they had to do was like CC the NFL on the email. Yeah. What the hell happened?
We're still trying to figure it out because there are a few different theories. There's no actual answer, by the way, but I will tell you what I have been told. From the Bengals standpoint, the Bengals told me that they notified the league at 3:55, and they got their permission slip in. Now, the Browns say that the Bengals, they sent something to the Bengals, but the Bengals didn't send it back to them until 3:59, and by the time it all got to the NFL, it was too late. The Browns protested to the league and said that this should be overturned, and Peter Rucco from the NFL offices reviewed it and quickly rendered a decision that no, it was not going to be overturned. Now, Bill Polian, who's done a trade or two in his time, was on NFL Live yesterday. And he said it's very simple. Each of the two teams notifies the league office in an email that we are trading this and we approve of this trade. And I know the Bengals did that. And I guess the Browns did or didn't do that. Now, the Browns say that this was just a snafu. It was not their fault. I'm just telling you what they're saying. Now, there are other people who believe that Hugh Jackson, which is definitely true, was the guy who wanted A.J. McCarron. And they were willing to give up second and third round draft choices for A.J. McCarron after they used a third round pick on Cody Kessler and a second round pick on Deshaun Kaiser. And who knows, they could be using the first pick in this draft on another quarterback. And there were people in the front office that didn't really want that to happen. So there are some people, conspiracy theorists, who say that some people might have conspired to prevent this trade. I have no evidence that that's true, but that theory is floating around out there. I think it's just a case where it's hard to imagine because Sashi Brown's assistant, a gentleman by the name of Chris Cooper, I believe his name is Chris Cooper, worked in the league office and worked for Ken Fiore in the management council and knows the rules, and yet it still didn't get done. So it's a strange thing. Look, this is why you work on this all day. And I know that the two sides were working on the deal all day. And yet it was allowed to go down to the last moment. It didn't get done. And now A.J. McCarron remains in Cincinnati, which actually may turn out to be a blessing for Cleveland because it gets to keep the picks when it may be taking a quarterback with the first pick in the draft anyway.
You know what's crazy about this, Greeny? I got traded, and I knew what time the trade deadline was.
I remember when you got traded.
Exactly. I'm not sure if you did a breaking news report on me. I'm not sure. We'll discuss that later. It was like 4:15. I get a phone call, and back then I had a BlackBerry, and I see Bruce Allen's name, and I'm like, okay, this is not good. Kind of hesitant to answer the phone.
He was the GM of Tampa at that time.
Exactly. He had called and had traded me to Indianapolis. So I just wonder with the A.J. McCarron deal, did they actually call A.J. McCarron? Since the deal was almost completed, did they call him and let him know? Because Bruce called me and was like, hey, one of the lamest excuses ever. Hey, Indianapolis wanted you, so we decided to, give in and give you away. And I'm like, okay, well, let's figure this out going from there. And so I just wonder how A.J. McCarron found out, or if he at all found out that he had been moved since the deal was never consummated.
He knew that he was trying to be moved.
Okay.
He said that yesterday. But he was awaiting the official word that he had been moved, which never came, and for good reason.
Wow.
Because he was not moved.
And look, it makes sense. He's a guy who's going to be a free agent. So much like the Garoppolo situation, you either trade him now or he's probably going to walk at the end of the season and you lose him for nothing, which brings us to Garoppolo, which is a move that continues to surprise me. I continue to sit here and be surprised that they did it. I understand all of the reasons for it. I understand the money part of it. I've seen a million different reports / theories. You broke the story of the actual trade itself. but I've seen a million theories, including Belichick told Garoppolo, look, we'll pay you whatever anyone else will pay you, but he wanted to go someplace and play. To Kraft stepped in, to a million different things. What do you know about the thinking behind trading away an up-and-coming young quarterback behind a 40-year-old, albeit all-time great, starter?
Well, I'll say this. I don't believe we've heard the last of this just yet. But what I do know is this, that the Patriots last offseason did not want to trade them. You even heard the 49ers say that they called the Patriots last offseason, and New England had no interest in dealing Garoppolo. We also know that the New England Patriots made repeated and multiple attempts to try to re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo. I remember getting a call in June saying, just keep your eye on this because this could happen, that Jimmy Garoppolo could re-sign with New England. And so I was always of the mind, certainly before the draft last year, and then after the draft, that they were going to do everything that they could to keep Jimmy Garoppolo in New England. And I think, in addition to whatever other factors there are, and there could be others, but I think that they tried, they continued to try, they made no leeway, they recognized that they were going to be unable to keep Jimmy Garoppolo long term, and we get into the season and see that Tom Brady at the age of 40 is getting better, not getting worse. So they took this as far as they could take it, right up to the day before the deadline when they were on their bye, when the Patriots called the 49ers on Monday to say, we're ready to make a deal. And the 49ers thought it was like money falling from the sky. They were not expecting that. They were not prepared for that. I don't think anybody was. And people wonder why the Patriots didn't trade him to Cleveland. It's pretty simple. I think that they wanted to get him out of conference. I think that Bill Belichick likes, trusts, and believes in John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. He's got long-standing relationships with both. I think that he wanted to do right by Jimmy Garoppolo, and he thought putting him in San Francisco was the right place to send him at this time in his life. He didn't trust sending him to Cleveland. And in the back of his mind, I don't think it was why he made the decision, but he's like, I'm not doing any favors for Cleveland, that city. So they send him to San Francisco at that point in time. I don't think it's what the Patriots wanted to do, but I think it's what they felt like they had to do right now.
Mike and Mike, Booger's here. Shefty's in our studio as well as we go through a variety of things. And just very quickly to finish up our Halloween conversation, Booger was just saying that he rented a golf cart to take his kids trick-or-treating around the neighborhood because it's hot. I had 180 degrees the opposite experience when I was a kid. I grew up in a building, a 30-story Manhattan skyrise, a high-rise. We had 30 stores, 30 floors, 6 apartments on each floor. So my brother and I, on Halloween, I was the Fonz every year, I think, we would go up to 30, and we'd start just ringing
179 rooms, right?
And you just on your way down, and you walk down one flight of stairs at a time. We never had to leave the building. My parents didn't have to go with us. So I was never, my dad didn't have to be that dad who's always walking behind the group drinking. There's always one group in the neighborhood. There was one guy who's got like 7 kids, and that are walking in front of him, his and some friends, and he only walks like a third of the way up your driveway, and he waves.
Exactly.
And he's got the red Solo cup, which is the universal sign for, we're trick-or-treating, and I've got something in here. I'm drinking right now as I'm walking these 4-year-olds around dressed as Batman and Robin. Okay. Anyway, Shefty, back to business.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by all of these trades, but I have to ask you about, we haven't even gotten into the Papa John story from yesterday, and you mentioned the Bob McNair thing that sort of kicked off this crazy week in the NFL, and I'm just curious what kinds of things you're hearing from inside the league, because you got Jerry Jones now. You and Mort reporting it over the weekend that Jerry Jones is really injecting himself into the Roger Goodell contract extension, and this is a major consideration. I mean, no matter what your perspective is on the stance that the Papa John's people took yesterday, the reality is the NFL is a business, a multi-billion-dollar business. This is one of their most significant partners. So we're talking about tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that hang in the balance, and people are going to worry about that. What kinds of things were you hearing?
Well, they're not the only sponsor. They're the only sponsor right now who has come out and said that. I've heard of other sponsors, but no one wants to say anything. No one wants to admit anything. But when you talk to teams, the one thing that I've been able to ascertain is merchandise sales way down, way down. We don't have exact figures. Maybe Darren Rovell could get on that and figure something out. But I'm telling you right now that the merchandise sales have taken a dramatic hit this year because of everything that's gone on with the league. We've seen these stories about the TV ratings. That's an issue. We've had season ticket holders and suite holders with every team in the league. I mean, do I know that I know it from enough teams to say that it's with every team in the league, calling to say we are threatening to cancel our season tickets or our suite for next year. So we're probably not hearing as much of this sort of stuff as has gone on this year, but I can assure you that it has been prevalent throughout the league this season.
Which goes back to the point, Greeny, and I think it's fascinating that Jerry Jones continues to just pick at the contract of Roger Goodell. And it almost seems as if he's trying to get a group of owners, and they're trying to lay blame to maybe save face with some of the sponsors saying, you know what? Roger didn't handle this situation over the last 18 months correctly. So either A, we're going to decrease his salary, or B, we're going to try to find somebody else in that role entirely. So I just wonder where Jerry Jones is coming from when it comes to that.
I think it's been pretty clear. Like, I think he's gathered together some people, some other owners, and it's hard to tell exactly how much support he does or doesn't have for this issue. But I think we could just look at the basic facts of this right now. Like, literally, when Mort and I were speaking to people last week, there were teams and owners that had no idea that this call went on last week, on Thursday last week in the afternoon. And this was a contract, and correct if I'm wrong here, but when the story first emerged in the Sports Business Journal this summer, I believe it was in August, they said it would be completed at the end of the summer. Then it would be by the start of the season. Then it was another month. Then it was another month. Then it was the anthem slowing it down. And here we are now into November, and the contract still isn't done. Now, maybe it does get done, and I can tell you the people on the compensation committee for the NFL who are in charge of this ultimately want to get this contract done and still are determined to get this contract done, and the chances are the contract still does get done. But here we are in November, and it's not done. And the other part of this is, of course, what does Roger think of all this? Because as one owner said to me, maybe Roger just says after a while, you know what? What do I need this for? I made a lot of money. I don't need these headaches. I don't need people bashing me and criticizing me. Let's just move on from this. And so it's just an interesting, fluid dynamic that we don't know where it's going and where it's going to wind up.
Mike and Mike, Adam Schefter is with us here with all the insight into the NFL. All right, running around some of the other trades, the Dwayne Brown situation, people will look at that. Clearly he was a holdout and all that kind of stuff, so it didn't surprise us from that standpoint, but we know he was also one of the most vocal players there about his displeasure for McNair. Was that coincidental, or did that happen for that reason?
Hey, listen, he had made it very clear to the Houston Texans for weeks in advance, I want out. I want to leave this organization. There were a number of reasons. Okay? And the Texans were shopping him long in advance, and in fact, they nearly struck a deal with the Seahawks about 1 month before that. And the trade at the last moment, the Texans backed out of. So they were always going back and forth, and there were other teams that jumped in to see if they could find a way to pry loose Dwayne Brown, but there was always something going on between Seattle and Houston. If you want to say his comments last week clinched it, that's certainly possible, but that idea was in the works all along anyway.
And I got 20 seconds for the Kelvin Benjamin thing because I was very surprised by that as well.
I think that you've got a GM in Buffalo and a head coach in Buffalo who knew him in Carolina, a relationship between Marty Herney and the people in Buffalo, and it made it such that they could do that deal in very quick fashion, unlike the Cleveland Browns and Cincinnati Bengals.
He is Adam Schefter. And again, does anyone have we seen if he's playing tonight? Do we know if he's going to play tonight?
They have not said. They say 50-50. My guess is he's going to play.
Again, the Bills and the Jets kick off this NFL weekend with an interesting game tonight in the AFC East. Schefter, you're just the best. What's there to say? Thank you very much. Pleasure to see you.
We'll take a short break. To the Sports Center right now.
Tons of baseball as we get back to that next. Stay there, Mike and Mike.